Hello all, thank you for tuning in to another video. Today's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be a video essay about a custom I am making. It's going to be a review of a custom I've already made, and I'm talking about this guy. That is, of course, Braun Strowman. He was just recently released by WWE, I think maybe last year. He was in that feud with Jacob Fatu, but I've had this completed for, I want to say, maybe 3 or 4 months. I've been lazy and I never took any pictures or anything of it to upload. And this was completed well before I made the YouTube channel, so there's that. But this is a pretty nice figure. I just recently got around to hitting him with like a matte coat to seal the decals and everything. I don't really have a lot of before and after progress shots of the parts and stuff I used for him, but I will be detailing what parts I did use and what I even did to make him look like how he looks, and of course we'll go over articulation and everything at the end. But I guess we can just hop right into the parts I used for this guy. As far as part selection goes, starting at the head, that is the Elite 87 Braun Strowman head sculpt. The body is the Ultimate Edition 15 Brock Lesnar. The shoulders and arms, those come from the Target exclusive Ultimate Edition Vader. The crotch piece, that comes from the Elite 54 Bray Wyatt. And then the hips, the thighs, and the knees, those come from the Elite 97 Omos figure. And then the lower calves, or the lower shins, I guess, those come from any like Roman Reigns Elite that has the pinned pants. Those are the ones you're going to want to use. And then the boots, those come from the Jazzwares Walmart exclusive Supreme John Moxley. And there are other parts I'd like to list as well, like the hair. I did not sculpt that. That comes from a Target exclusive Jazzwares Samoa Joe figure. I just cut it to fit, and it actually looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. There also is a new neck joint in here. It's not stock. Let me show you guys. As you can see, that comes from a McFarlane Wildcat figure, heavily modded, of course, to fit in there. And then there's also drop down hips from the Ultimate Edition, I think 24 Bray Wyatt, the glow in the dark Bray Wyatt. That's where those came from. And then there's also a Jazzwares joint in his abdomen. Let me if I can take this. Yeah, any Jazzwares joint really works because they all share the same thing, but I did this to, of course, update the articulation on that Brock Lesnar body, because if you guys own that figure, you know that he does not have the modern day or the updated 360 swivel. He just has that pinned joint, which absolutely sucks. I hate that thing. That's why. That was the first mod I did for this figure. And then the last thing I guess I can list is the decals. Those come courtesy of Curb Stomp City Decals on Instagram. I'll leave a link to his stuff, but he's got some sick products. But I mean, that's really it for parts. They mean nothing on paper because I did do a lot of modifying to get all of these things to fit together, and I will do my best to explain how I did the more important mods on this figure in the next portion of the video. And welcome to the mods overview. Now, I did lie in the beginning. I said I didn't have any before and after shots of the parts, but I did some digging through my photo album and I actually did find some photos, so I'll be showcasing those. But we're gonna start from head to toe, and I'm just gonna work my way down on the mods I did for him, starting with the hair mod. So first I cut the hair off of the Samoa Joe figure. And then I took an X-Acto knife and I cut out space on the Elite 87 Braun Strowman head sculpt. And I just kept doing it and test fitting it. And I did it little by little just to make sure the fit was perfect. And then I glued it together and I repainted both the hair and the beard. And that's the final product there. It turned out pretty good, I think. And next we got the neck peg mod. And this definitely took a lot of work. So starting first, I took the Wildcat head, I turned it upside down. I cut the head down completely. You can see on the right, it turned into that little nub. and then on the top I cut off that ball joint and then I drilled a hole into it as well. Then I took a random Mattel peg, I just removed it out of an Elite figure, and then I cut that down as well, and then I drilled a hole in the bottom of that. Then I took some floor wire and I put some glue and I fitted it in between those two pieces. Here you can see me showing off some of the articulation of that new neck peg. I basically turned the standard Mattel peg into a barbell joint like how the import figures have, and it turned out pretty sick. You can see it's got the head tilt and everything, and I take it off here, the whole peg comes with it. I do solve that issue by just cutting down the sides of that Mattel peg in there, that way it makes the popping on and off easier. But you can see on the inside, I took that Wildcat head, or the remaining part of it, and I just fitted it with some epoxy Sculpt, and I put it all in place and glued it all together. Now moving along, we can go over the torso joint mod. I will say this mod and the next mod basically share the same process as the neck peg mod, but I still want to explain all of them separately just to avoid any confusion, and because this is the mods overview portion of the video. So first I take the Mattel joint, and then I cut off the bottom connector, and then I drill a hole into that stem. And then with the Jazzwares part, I just cut off the top part of the ball joint peg, and then I cut off the bottom part of the ball joint connector, and then I drill a hole into the top part of the peg. Then of course I take some floor wire and I glue it in between those two pieces, and this is what the final result should look like. Here I am showing off the articulation of the new torso joint. Works perfectly and it still pops apart like a normal Jazzwares figure would. And then for the ball joint connector, I just put some sculpting clay in the lower abdomen. I formed it around it and I just let it cure. Next, we can talk about the crotch mods. Now, I've already done a more detailed explanation of my process in my last video on how I mod the crotch pieces to have drop down hips and whatnot. So I'm not going to be too lengthy with the explanation in this video. We're just going to skim over it. So first I cut off the hip ball joint from the Elite 97 Omos figure, and then I drilled a hole into the stem, I guess you could call it. Then with the Mattel drop down hips, I cut off the ball joints from both sides and then drilled holes into those stems as well. Then of course I took the tried and true floor wire and I set it in between both pieces and glued it all together. And this is the final look. The left side is the finished product. Of course I repeated it for the right side as well. And here are those modded drop down hips with the Omos ball joints on them, and then you can see me fitting it into the modded crotch piece as well. Like I said, there's more of an extensive detailed process explanation in my last video, so go check that out. And for the remaining mods, I don't really have any before and after shots of those parts, so I'm going to do my best to explain it on camera right now. Starting with his head sculpt, I of course did mod it to be interchangeable. You can see in there, I drilled out room in the Elite 97 Braun head, and then I took a fodder interchangeable Mattel head and I cut the peg out and I glued it in there. I do explain my process in the last video as well, so if you want more of a detailed explanation, go check that out. And you can see on the peg here, I was explaining before how I cut it down to make it more interchangeable, and it works. It's much smoother popping on and off, and it stays on there, so can't complain. Next, I did mod the shins to fit. These are the Elite Roman shins. Now, on their own, without any modification, they're too loose on the Omos knees. So what I did was I took some Procreate sculpting putty and mixed some, threw it in the Roman shin, and then I molded it to the Omos knee just to fill the space in there, and then I pegged it all back together and it works flawlessly, so no complaints. And then finally the boots. These are of course from that Supreme John Moxley. What I did was I took the lowers and I cut it like halfway down the shin, I would say. Cut that down completely so it's like a cylinder, And then I took the Roman shins and I drilled out more room in the peg in there, and then I just put the Mox boot, glued it in place in there. So that should basically do it for all of the mods on this Strowman figure. Pretty extensive list, but definitely worth it to get this look because he looks awesome. And I did want to show off the decals I applied before I moved on. They turn out pretty nice. You know, I got the Superman shoulder tattoo. I would have liked to extend it onto the butterfly joints and up here because I think in real life it does go over his trap, but it turned out nice on the figure. Then he got the strong man with the barbell, his country tattoo, and then the new Firefly braid tribute tattoo he got, his back tattoo, and then his last name tattoo on his arm there. That turned out pretty good. But yeah, if you guys want a tutorial on how to apply decals, I followed the Figure Dude's tutorial on YouTube. I'll link that in the description below, but his video was a huge help when I was applying these. And I did come over after I applied them and I put a matte finish on it, but it's still a little shiny in some areas. I will probably come back with the second coat, but it turned out pretty nice. And for his articulation, starting at the head with that added neck peg, just want to show you guys one more time. Without the head, this is what it looks like. It definitely moves much better than the standard Mattel neck peg because it is on a ball joint, whereas the original Mattel neck peg, it's pinned in through the middle, so it only can go like this. But with the head on there, he looks up, shifting back, he looks up pretty far. It's pretty insane for a Mattel figure, I would say. Then looking down with the shifting, that's about average, I'd say. And then of course you can go all the way around, and then he gets pretty good head tilt as well. They look pretty natural when posing. Then he's got the butterfly joints, they go back and forth. His shoulders, they go all the way around, go up this far, and then he's got the bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, pretty good for a bigger figure there. Wrists, they swivel and then they're on a hinge, and then the added Jazzwares joint in there gives us the full 360 articulation. It's a little bit squeaky, and then the crunch forward goes this far, and then it goes back this far. Now it is gappy. That's something I wish I would have thought about before I made the figure, but it's not that big a deal to me. I'm not really gonna be, you know, posing him like this all the time, and even if I am, it's not a big issue. Then he's got the waist swivel. It goes all the way around, and then he's got drop down hips. Those move like a standard Ultimate Edition. They give us this far forward of a kick. That's pretty insane. Look at that. He's doing a high kick basically. I go this far back, not that far back. I go out this far. That's, yeah, this is insane for a larger scale figure. That's awesome. He's got thigh swivel, double jointed knees. Even those are awesome too. The range on this guy is nuts. And then he's got boot swivel, of course. Feet are on a hinge. I wish they went forward more, but it's alright. Then he's got ankle rocker, and then toe hinge. So the articulation on this guy, it's definitely way better than a lot of Mattel figures. I would say even all of them. The articulation scheme is insane on him, and he can do some really insane poses. Like he can even get into a crotch, or not a crotch, a crouch pose almost. Like that's natural. That is a natural looking pose right there for a Mattel figure. He's moving like a Marvel legend. So he can definitely move with the best of them. But I think now we can take a look at some accessories that comes with this guy. And this is what I would include with him for accessories if he was a standard release figure. It is pretty lackluster, I'll be honest. There isn't really much that I would include with him outside of this. I mean, we can run through them, though. It's mostly just hands, starting with these ones. These are just a pair of normal gripping hands, neutral gripping hands. Comes with basically every single figure, so nothing new there. Then moving on, we got a pair of kind of like choke slamming or larger gripping hands. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else you would use those for. Pointing fingers, set of pointing fingers. You do need to point at people at times, so why not include them with him? Then I got a pair of kind of like clawing hands or championship holding gripping kind of hands, or just, I don't know, clawing at his own face kind of hands. Why not? And then of course we got the tried and true gigantic splayed out hands, which I think these are actually fitting for Strowman, because I like to use these for like running poses or, you know, just putting his hands out because they're massive. Then of course, tank top, nothing new there. This, I will be honest, is the exact same tank top as Andrade's. They actually fit both characters, surprisingly, even with a different body type. So this is actually a really good tank top. I highly recommend. I will include a link for it in the description. And then final accessory, I would just include the Universal title. Obviously, this doesn't go with that look of Strowman, but I don't know. I would just include it because Mattel likes to pump titles and random characters packages anyways. Why not? I will say, though, this has the Roman Reigns side plates. I don't have plain side plates for the Universal title, so yeah, this is just to get the idea across. Now, if you guys see in the thumbnail, you will know there is actually one missing accessory, which I will just show off right now. It is a custom screaming head sculpt for Strowman. This one took quite a bit of work. It was originally a retro Braun Strowman figure, and then I took all the hair off, I cut it off and everything, sanded it down, and then I repainted the head. You can kind of see it kind of shows up on camera. I didn't paint this part. I will probably go back and paint that later, but repainted the beard and everything, redrew the eyebrows, and then I added another Jazzwares Samoa Joe hairpiece to it to match with the other head sculpt. And it looks pretty good. This is a good screaming head sculpt, and this is another thing that I would include with the Strowman figure is a screaming head sculpt. You gotta have a screaming head sculpt for Braun. But I think now we are good to hop into some size comparisons for this big SOB. To the top of his head, Strowman stands at just about 7 3/4, which is pretty good. I think that's a perfect height for him. As far as figure comparisons, we can bring in some of his past opponents. Got Roman Reigns, Ultimate Edition Roman Reigns, and then we got this custom Ultimate Edition Samoa Joe. And these guys have had quite a colored history, I'd say. They put on some bangers back in 2017 and 2018. I mainly brought in Joe just to show another bigger character or bigger figure, just to see the stature of each other, but they look pretty good. Let's get these guys out of the way. We can bring in some of his family. We got this custom Ultimate Edition Brody Lee or Luke Harper. And then I got this custom Elite Cowboy Fiend. And these scale, I think these scale perfect. I think in real life, Strowman and Harper are about the same height. So that actually works out really well. And then I think Bray in real life, he was about 6'3", 6'4", so this actually works out perfect. And yeah, they look awesome. May Mr. Wyndham and Mr. Lee rest in peace. Get those out of the way. And then for the final comparisons, I wanted to just bring in my last custom, this Ultimate Edition Andrade. And then I wanted to bring in the Ultimate Edition 15 Brock Lesnar. Just to show a little bit before and after of the parts. Obviously, you can see the torso here was elongated to give him more of the height, and tattoos removed and everything. And I kind of want to just compare the articulation. Now, on this Brock, I did modify it to give it the 360, so it actually does have it. But as Crunch, I want to just compare the differences. That's pretty good. I will say I did mod this one to have more of a crunch too, so it's not really that fair of a comparison, but I think compared to like a stock Ultimate Edition Lesnar, that this would look absolutely insane as a before and after. But yeah, I guess that's really it for comparisons. I don't have much else. I would have liked to compare him to like a Jacob Fatu, but I don't have a figure of Jacob Fatu just yet, so these will have to do. But that should about do it for this custom review of Braun Strowman. There are still things I want to do to him, like touching up the Screaming Head sculpt or going over with another matte coat, but this is essentially his final look. Please let me know what you guys think of this review and figure. I would love to hear your guys' opinions, whether you liked it or disliked it. I'd just like to hear your guys' thoughts. And if you guys watched to the end, thank you so much. It really means a lot to me, and hopefully you consider liking the video or subscribing. My next couple of videos will most likely be tutorial videos, potentially things like how I mod articulation or how I do a specific mod, so keep a lookout for that. But that's all from me. I will see you guys very soon.